how you tell a story with those numbers, how you explain to investors, this is where we are now, there's where we want to get to in 5 years, and this is how we're going to do that. And that's typically supported with numbers, facts and figures. And that's not something that you would get from accounting staff or a bookkeeping service.
Welcome back to the New F Word podcast, where we talk finances in business. I'm your host, Colin Hewitt, founder and CEO at Float. We're so glad to be back for season 3. And this season, we've got some great guests that are going to bring a ton of value. We'll be diving further into how fractional CFOs add value, what financial clarity actually looks like, and what systems and apps are leading the way. New guests, sharper conversations, let's get into it. Hey, I'm delighted to be joined today by Frank Overtoom, who is a long-serving fractional CFO and is working for a very exciting company today. So Frank, it's really good to have you. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Colin. Great to be here. Thanks for the opportunity.
I really want to talk about what you're doing at Gravity. I think that's the most exciting company that I have seen in a long time. And I definitely want to try it at some point. So, but maybe you can give us a bit of a background as how you ended up there, a bit about the journey to reach that kind of position, and a bit about how you got into that job as well.
Well, my background is in finance. I trained as an accountant with PwC and spent a few years in consumer goods with Kellogg's, in pharmaceuticals, in retail, and then more recently in technology and technology company, working for a big US multinational that is the leading player in card data. I had an opportunity to effectively retire a little bit earlier. It was consolidation through different levels. And at the end, the regional roles were being changed to global roles. So I thought this time to try something new. One of my friends was looking to set up a fractional execs business. It's called Fractional Execs. And this was a great opportunity to effectively do the best parts of your old job on a kind of part-time fractional basis. So that's how I originally became a fractional exec and have a number of clients, including Gravity, as you mentioned. We'll talk about that some more later. But it's been a great and exciting opportunity. So the best of the old job, I would say, and doing it in a more flexible time.
Yeah, I mean, that seems to be the general theme that everybody's saying, is that, I mean, some people miss the excitement of the real involvement, but it sounds like it's possible to get that, when you get the right company, you can still get that excitement, even though you're working fractionally.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think, it will never be quite the same as being there, 9 to 5 days a week. You miss the kind of buzz and little bits of information that go on. So you are slightly playing catch up, if you like. But with all my fractional customers, I would probably speak to them, at least once a week. For one of them, I chair a weekly trading meeting. So, that ensures regular contact. You hear what's going on, you look at the numbers. So it's not like a sort of, you rock up for one day a month at the end of the month. It's more of an ongoing connection.
Yeah. And the opportunity to move into the Gravity role, did that come through the fractional website connection?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, what you see with a lot of smaller businesses, SMEs looking to expand, is they're missing an element of experienced senior execs that have been through the journey and can help advise them on the next step. So either starting, very small and scaling up, or you already have an operation and you're looking to scale it to a next level of growth. And the fractional exec is just a great way for companies to tap into that expertise at literally a fraction of a cost. If you're doing 1 to 2 days a month, that's kind of 5 to 10% of the cost of employing somebody full time. So, imagine how many, if you have budget for one senior exec and you could have 5 or 10 of them at a fraction of the cost, how much more powerful your business can be, how much experience you have at your fingertips to help you expand.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about how this role came into being, and was the people audition for it in that role, or?
Typically here it's another case of expansion. You'll find that many smaller businesses already have an accounting or a bookkeeping function, externally sourced. So they can tell you at the end of the month if you've made a profit or a loss, but not how. And they can't also say, what's the next 12 months likely to be? And typically They don't have things like sales pipelines and how you translate that into a forecast. And that's where a fractional CFO can come in. So understand the numbers, analyze the business, look at the key drivers, put that into a model that is clear, simple, easy to understand, that you can work with the management team and then also with investors. So it's a credible piece of work. It's something that somebody externally with some gravitas has had a look at. It's not, sort of a high level calculation that, when you start poking at it, wouldn't really stand up to scrutiny. So I think that's the case that, a number of businesses, including Gravity, they're on the verge of further expansion, and they're looking to get that kind of senior management experience in finance and other areas as well. And that's how the role came about.
So for those who haven't heard of them, Gravity is a company commercializing jet suits for humans. So it's the ones people may have seen with the jets that come out of the arm that make it look like an Iron Man suit. And is it a UK company?
It is a UK company. Yeah, UK company, UK invention, and very exciting. If you go onto YouTube, you can see the videos, the history of Richard Browning, trying it out in his backyard to a sort of professional suit that you have now for entertainment purposes. So you and I can go and try one on and have a go at flying, or for professional purposes as well. So it's very exciting. I think it's one of those things where when people say, "What company do you work for?" If you show them a sort of 30-second YouTube clip, then it's very easy to understand.
Yeah. And as your role as a CFO, then, I mean, obviously a company like that has a big vision. Where do you sit in terms of trying to enable that, in terms of trying to say, hold on a sec, guys, like maybe we should, try and get a few units sold locally first? Or is it kind of like shoot through the moon and let's try and get a government contract to put these into, deployment? What's the kind of how involved do you get in the strategy there?
One of the characteristics of a good CFO, fractional or full time, is they have a good understanding of the business. They understand what it needs to be successful. They have an understanding of what the market looks like, how quickly that market could be penetrated, what's in the sales pipeline, what's a realistic short-term prospect, what's something that, might take years and years and years. So, you're very much involved in the business. One of the companies I worked with before would call the CFO role actually a CFOO, Chief Financial Operating Officer. So it's, very much, they're running the drills, they're running the processes, they're making sure that, every week you look at the sales pipeline, you challenge the sales organization on, their deliveries of the previous week, what's planned for the coming weeks and months. So it is a very operational, commercial role, and that's the same as Gravity, as any of the other clients that I work with and any of the businesses I've worked with before. So it's about having a, realistic expectation. I guess you're understanding what's your market size. So if you thought, everywhere they do, I don't know, skydiving, you could have a jet suit. You try and get some statistics on how many centers there are across the world. If you look at things like search and rescue, how many search and rescue organizations are there around the world, or professional services, military applications, shipboarding. Where are there a lot of ships in the world, where are a lot of ports. So you can quickly, make an estimate of, how many people are in those areas and those disciplines, how many suits would you need? So, that's your kind of total addressable market. And then, how quickly can you penetrate that, and sometimes, particularly in defense application, these things take a long time. The procurement process is challenging. Rightly so. It needs to, there's serious bits of kit. They need to ensure that they're all safely made, that they're tested, robust, and so on. So, but these things do take time, and it's trying to get a sort of feel for, how quickly that sort of market penetration ultimately can be executed.
Yeah, absolutely. And in terms of competition as well, is there anybody else doing something similar? Do you have unique technology? How's that work?
It's pretty unique technology. We're not aware of anything that's close competitor. You look at drones, you see sort of pictures of flying taxis, but it's not quite the same. It's still, very difficult for technology that runs on batteries. Batteries are very heavy, to get them airborne, plus the weight of the human, plus flying, a longer period of time. I mean, gravity is experienced also with battery electric powered suits, but it's challenging. So at the moment, we don't think there's anything else comparable on the market.
Yeah, but you must have to take quite a long view, and like you say, in terms of the time to get to market, it's different to a piece of software that you can iterate and build on. It's something that's taking how long? I mean, how long does it take to get a suit manufactured?
I mean, we've got suits at the moment. You can try them out tomorrow. You can go down and book a slot and get flying. So we have a number of suits and have had for a number of years. So certainly on the entertainment side, at the Dubai races, you can see on YouTube, they're real suits. They're up and running. So there's plenty of suits available. And I guess the bigger challenge is if you had a massive order come in, how quickly could you scale that up? So if we needed 100 suits in 3 months' time, that might be a slight challenge. But if it's sort of gradually ramping up, that's okay. We can deal with that.
And has the sort of tariff world, has that affected you guys much in that way?
I think not yet. There are customers outside the US that we're pretty close with deals or have concluded deals with. And I think in the US we would consider manufacturing locally. So we have a facility out there, and we can source, or we could build them, source the components and build out there. So there may be a small tariff element, but at the moment it shouldn't be an issue for not being able to sell them.
Yeah. And is the sales then, is that the big unknown, is really building out a sales team and trying to scale, a sales team boots on the ground?
I think, so the sales team we have, the contacts we have, also it's, I think, probably getting through the whole procurement process and the time it takes to be an approved supplier, gets budgets approved. That is probably the biggest challenge. And I think once you have a number of suits in operations, you could point to the practical experience. That will make life easier. But it's that's probably the biggest challenge at the moment.
It's fascinating. No, I'm. It's an exciting prospect. And do you get involved in the board meetings? Are you sort of at that level?
Yeah, absolutely. So we would have, monthly meetings, weekly meetings in some cases, and then strategy meetings, periodically every sort of 3 to 6 months. So yeah, absolutely. The fractional CFO role is very much part of the leadership team.
Yeah, is the big vision then of this company, do you think it's going to stay relatively niche in sort of entertainment space, or do you think it's potential to go into other areas, and will the company build out into other areas?
Yeah, I think if you looked at the sort of opportunities, particularly across defense sectors and the professional sector, as we call it, they're huge, right? So if you assume that, I don't know, 1% of special forces worldwide might end up with a suit like that, that's a huge number. The market is potentially enormous. And we think the applications, the use cases are very compelling. And then on the entertainment side as well, I mean, I think people enjoy the opportunity. It's something completely different that's not offered anywhere else. So I think there's significant opportunities in that as well. So I think that it could be a huge opportunity.
That's exciting. And do you think at some point that it will need a full-time CFO to come in and replace, or do you think, how do you see that playing out?
Sure. I think if it all takes off as planned, it'd be great to have a full-time CFO. That would be a real success for the business. So absolutely, that's all about growing and scaling. So that'll be exciting when that day comes.
Yeah. Have you been through that process before in any of your other gigs? Has it come to that point where you've seen a point where it's time to replace and say, guys, you need to bring somebody full time in here?
Yeah, I think not yet is the short answer. I think the other opportunities, there are existing people in place, and this is about kind of helping them to expand and grow. So that's one where, you might see it as more of temporary assignment, but certainly, there is a lot of runway. And, if you can recruit a good team to help you, grow the finance organization as you go along, then, those people, that person may end up, leading the organization and being, CFO themselves. So that'll be exciting further development.
Were there gaps to fill when you came into do you typically tend to hire? I mean, a lot of times CFOs say to me, the books were a mess, or, when you did a controller, or, there was no COO, so I was playing that role. What do you typically find when you come into a company?
What I found typically is that, that they're generally good operations people, and that you have an accounting function that delivers, accurate but basic materials, right? Basic financial numbers. So, suppliers get paid, customers pay you, payroll gets done. That's a fairly straightforward exercise, and there are a lot of external bookkeeping companies that can help with that. So that tends to not really be the problem. The challenge is more, how you tell a story with those numbers, how you explain to investors, this is where we are now, there's where we want to get to in 5 years, and this is how we're going to do that. And that's typically, with supported with numbers, facts and figures. And that's typically not something that you would get from accounting staff or a bookkeeping service. They'll give you the kind of basic sort of, health needs in finance that, like I said before, they do your tax returns, payroll, which is important and great. And clearly, if that goes wrong, then you're facing a different challenge. But in my experience, that's not really been the major challenge.
Tell us a little bit about, just changing direction slightly, in terms of fractional execs. How's that going? Is that growing? Does it have a group is it staying sort of similar size, or how are things going there?
Yeah, the fractional execs business, I think, is growing very well. I mean, feel free to have a look at the website, fractional execs. If you Google that, it started small. Alan Giles, the founder, set that up, was also from a big corporate background, and decided that he wanted to do something different and set up the organization initially, finding people who can join the team. So that business is really around almost kind of a full management service. So if you wanted not just finance, but you wanted sales, you wanted engineering people, product people, HR people, there's a raft of people who can do that. One application where I think that was particularly successful is if in a business that had kind of a great product, sort of ERP at the core of it, wanted to set it off as a separate company, but didn't want the senior management distracted by the separate company. So, you can hire in almost a whole management team from someone like fractional execs, and they could really help with somebody obviously who knows and understands the business to kind of run and grow that without the distraction. So that would be another, great use case for a fractional exec offering.
Not just CFOs, it's the whole team, the whole C-suite.
Absolutely. And they've, just to kind of add, there's also now an international element to fractional execs, which started in the UK and now has offices in the US, in Canada, the Middle East, South Africa. So it is expanding a wider network. As you have customers, clients who want to grow internationally, if you can support them on that journey with local resources in those countries, so much the better.
Yeah. So, okay. Yeah. It makes a lot of sense. And if people were thinking about moving into fractional role, is that organization they would just approach and say, hey, keep me on your books, or?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, it's always worth having a chat with Alan or some of the other members in the team to hear kind of, straight from them how they've enjoyed it. Alan himself was also working as a fractional role, his sales and marketing expertise. So he's a sort of has been a player manager as well. He can also give that experience. No, it's exciting. I mean, some people are potentially choosing it as a portfolio career, right? So, instead of working 5 days a week for one company, you could work 1 day a week for 5 companies. It ends up being the same and well, in terms of a number of hours, but potentially, very, very diverse, and you have a lot more flexibility when it's you working with a number of different companies and just working for one. So it's exciting.
Are you tied in once you're working with them to not go not independent contract for anybody else, or how does that work?
Yeah, I think there's if clearly if they introduce a client, then that's the relationship. But again, fractionals can be approached directly. It would be unusual, I think, to have a kind of sole link with one organization. Absolutely.
Yeah, no, I was speaking to a fractional CFO recently who was with a relatively large organization and didn't have it, was looking for more work, but couldn't take it on because it was part of the contract is when you work for this organization, you can't work for anybody else. So that's not the case for this one.
Okay, well, it needs to renegotiate his contract, but I think it's
yes, I won't mention any names.
I think it's but I think it's sort of what's reasonable. So it depends on how the the client, I guess, is sourced, right? So if it's sourced through the fractional agency, then it's only right and proper that they retain that relationship. But if it comes through a different route, then typically you would contract with them for, a number of days, right? So they then, provided you can still meet those days and you're not sort of overloaded with other work from then I think that's okay. It's really up to you as to how much you want to work. Ultimately, do you want to do, 1 day a week, 2-3 days a month, a bit more, a bit less? That's the beauty of the role generally.
I saw you're also working for a company called Book My Garage. Is that still something that's active for you?
Yeah, very much so. It's a very exciting company. It's the leading marketplace for car servicing. So if you typed into Google, car service near me, this would be one of the first ones that come up. It's a great service. It's a rated garage that will provide that, at a very reasonable cost. And you could book it straight online. So you go on, you type in your reg and your postcode, you click a slot and job's done. So it's a great offering. It's successful. It's market leading. And it's doing very well, growing very significantly year on year and expanding. So long may it continue.
Brilliant. Yeah, I'll definitely check that out. Yeah, and in terms of that's a very different type of company. How would you contrast some of the challenges in that one? Is it more fundraising or?
No, I think that was more established company, that is growing rapidly and looking to kind of scale. So, a slightly different phase to say Gravity or some of the other companies that I've worked with. So kind of the challenge, how do you continue to make it grow and be more successful, penetrate the market further? What challenges what additional services can you offer? So, recently there, in addition to car servicing, there's also car repairs. So body shops, if your car's been in an accident, it's maybe not serious enough for a full, repair, but it's got damages and you want to just have that done, smart repairs, then again, that's a service you're offering. So it's looking how to make that interesting and fresh all the time and, provide new innovative offerings there. But, very exciting.
And in terms of things like KPIs then for that, you'd be looking at things like cost of customer acquisition, are they the advertising, budgeting? I mean, that must be a huge part of it. I haven't seen any TV ads yet, but maybe there's
radio ads if you that are very, very targeted. A lot of it is online advertising because that's a tried and tested method for Book My Garage and indeed many others who choose to market in that way. So yeah, things like booking volumes, number of garages, garage on the network, those types of KPIs are absolutely critical to the business. A lot of garages do have spare capacity, and also sometimes franchise garages have good opportunities. So it doesn't have to be a local garage. It can also franchise garage is an important part of the business. So it's a very wide offering, and looking to continue to grow with those metrics and offer new services and new products.
How do you feel about the economy in general at the moment? Are you feeling this is a time to scale up? And obviously we're just about to have a budget that doesn't look like it's going to be hugely favorable across the board. What are your, you've been around for a while. What are your thoughts on how to approach this?
I mean, I think the businesses you work with, obviously not immune from the overall economy. So, if people are feeling, more cash strapped, there's less money around through higher taxes, that's going to have a kind of an indirect impact. So I guess some of the businesses that, some of the sectors, are going to be more impacted than others. But things like car servicing, you're still going to need to service your car. You're still going to need to have an MOT. So that's going to continue to be a requirement. And in terms of, jet suits, in terms of the applications and the sectors that are impacted, they're probably a little bit less directly impacted by the taxes that have been raised last year and are likely to be raised this year. But so I would say it's generally more of an environmental context overall, less money around, make people more nervous, reluctant to invest, but there will continue to be sectors of the economy that will grow well in spite of the additional burdens.
And in terms of if somebody's thinking about choosing, like maybe hiring a CFO for the first time and they haven't done that yet, what would you say? How should they approach? Because if you've never hired before in that role, there's obviously a chance to get it wrong. So what would be your advice to finding the right fit?
Yeah. I mean, in some ways, it's no different to advertising or recruiting for a full-time CFO. It's a business partner, the fractional CFO, typically and not necessarily an interim position. So you're with the business for the foreseeable future. So it's not, come in 6 months, we've got this massive change project, and then you leave. It's a much more long-term relationship. So the business people you work with, the CEOs, the leadership team will have a kind of similar long-term perspective. But so in that sense, it's probably no different. What should they look for? Be open, spend some time with the fractional CFO to have them understand the business, let them ask questions, let them speak to the leadership team, get them to understand the business. What are the KPIs? What existing management reporting do you have? What things are important? And then get a sort of agreed agenda for, how you can build on that and how you can, develop strategic plans. But typically fractional CFOs who've worked in different industries, different countries, will be used to working in that sector. Yeah, this is very, very specific sector experience, but they'll bring a very broad perspective of different customers in different industries in different stages of development. And it's invariable that they'll be able to add value and bring some of that perspective back to, I'd say, almost any business in any sector.
And on the flip side, what would you say if one piece of advice for somebody thinking about moving to taking on to becoming a fractional CFO for the first time?
As a fractional, as a sort of fractional CFO, or is it a CEO hiring a fractional the first?
No, I would say moving, if you're in a full-time role and you're thinking of moving to fractional.
Yeah. I mean, clearly the challenge with a fractional CFO is by what it says on the tin, right? So you're not working full-time. So either you've got to decide you're happy to work part-time, or you need, sufficient number of fractional roles to, make it almost full-time. And, it may be challenging if people say, well, look, you haven't done a fractional role before. How do I know you can do a fractional role? But, think about it. Think about, what you would do as a fractional CFO, particularly more, let's say, the analysis and the strategic advice part, and things that you wouldn't do. So you're not phoning up people chasing debts or paying suppliers or managing, payroll or all of that. And so I think you can develop a very credible argument that says, look, you don't need somebody there full time for all of that. What you want is the experience and the advice, and you only need that, 1 day a week or 2 days a month or whatever the number is. And then, you realize that you're signing up for a time commitment that is roughly of that magnitude. But if you still got, a mortgage to pay and other expenses, and it's difficult to go from full time to fractional, unless you've literally got 5 or 6 lined up, then that may be a little bit of a stepping stone. So that a little bit of word of caution. But, for me, it was, I was very happy in where I was in my career. In fact, it's a sort of perfect balance at the moment of still having enough free time to do the kind of things you didn't have time for when you're working full time, yet still keeping kind of intellectually engaged and stimulated with, very exciting customers in very exciting points of their development. So I would say, best of both worlds. And it's sometimes difficult to put a price on that, but it's something definitely worth considering, and how much more free you feel.
Yeah. No, I was going to ask you, I guess some people, if they're in that mode, they could jump from the frying pan into the fire where they're just, running after, they're doing even more amount of work because they're getting pulled between one client to the next. How have you, I guess, maybe just how have you managed just to keep a boundary where you have that free time? You're not getting sucked into.
Yeah, no, good question. I mean, obviously every business has deadlines. That is important, but I tend to find that the sort of SME sector is perhaps a little bit more flexible than the huge corporates where you actually had to report on working day, whatever, 3 or 4, and you had to have your forecast and had to be done to the nth degree. Typically in smaller, medium-sized businesses, it's slightly less time critical. So I think as long as you can commit to, replying within a reasonable period of time, whether it's one day early or one day later, I guess doesn't really, make a huge amount of difference. So I think there's a sort of inbuilt flexibility there. I think, if you took on, 10 fractional assignments or, very, very high number, you may find it a little bit more challenging. The scenario that you were describing. But certainly if there is some flexibility in your diary, you can maybe, give up some of the, the social activities that you were planning and do a morning of work and then move that to another occasion. So I think provided there is a little bit of flexibility in the diary, it works very well.
Yeah, it sounds great. And I suppose some people maybe don't like if they've never had that kind of capacity or that free time, what have you found having a bit more space? What have you done with that space? How do you fill your time when you do have a bit of free time?
Yeah, sure. Well, I enjoy cycling and tennis, as to a bit of golf, other things, hiking, going around the UK and bought a camper van, for example. So all of these things that you might have wanted to have done before, but you just couldn't because you were working full time. All of a sudden, you can. So I found it pretty easy to, kind of fill the spare time. And, it's nice to have a balance, I think. There are some people who say, I was working full time, then I retired, I did nothing, and it drove me crazy and I went back to full time because, but I think there is still so many, exciting things to do, non-work things to do. It's this is a great opportunity to combine them. So like I said, tennis, cycling, golf, it's very quick. Your diary can fill up, very quick. You could do that all day long, 5 days, 7 days a week, even if you wanted to.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It sounds fantastic. And it sounds like you're having a good time, which, I imagine bleeds into the work as well. If you're enjoying your life and you're going to show up in a different way at work.
Yeah, no, it's the best of both worlds. As I said before, you've got the flexibility to kind of work when you want to, and then do free time things when you want to, by and large. And it's rare that there is an absolute clash. Occasionally there's a clash, that's fine, but in a typical month you won't find too many clashes that can't be overcome. So, I highly recommend it.
Brilliant. Well, look, Frank, it's been so great chatting, and really wish you all the best.
Thank you.
And hope I get a chance to try one of those gravity suits soon. So
absolutely.
Thanks so much for coming on.
You're very welcome. Thanks for having me. It's been great talking to you, and I hope it's been informative for you and all your listeners. Have a great day.
Thanks, Frank.
Take care.
Thanks for tuning in to another episode of The New F Word. I hope you enjoyed it. Remember, expert financial advice shouldn't be limited to those with just big budgets. You can access the same level of advice for a fraction of the costs thanks to this fractional revolution. I believe that every growing business needs to know how much a game changer this can be. So if you loved the episode, please consider subscribing to the show. It'll help us keep doing what we're passionate about, and feel free to share this episode with others who might find it useful. Finally, we'd love to hear your thoughts. Feel free to connect with us on LinkedIn. See you in the next one.